Hi Brian, welcome to Greenbridge. I'm Daniel and I'm excited to be talking to you and joining the conversation about waste in the building industry, and look forward to telling you a little bit more about what we do at Greenbridge.
Look, first let's start with some stats. These just seem unbelievable. Now this is according to the New Zealand Green Building Council, and you're affiliated with them, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Worldwide, the construction and operation of buildings accounted for 39% of emissions in 2017. That seems extraordinary.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Looking at the New Zealand context, if you look at a decade, let's go from 2007 to 2017, New Zealand emissions from the construction industry have increased a whopping 66%. And this is the one that we can't deny. You might say, oh, maybe those stats are biased because, it's coming from the New Zealand Green Building Council. But all across New Zealand, if you look at landfills and you look at the stats of who's contributing the most waste, across New Zealand landfills, between 25 right up to 40% of the waste in landfills is waste from the construction industry.
You're 100% right. In fact, I did my own research a few years ago and came up with similar figures, and back then it was looking at about 30 to 40% of New Zealand landfill. That was about 3 years ago. So yeah, they're not new to me, but it doesn't make them any less exciting to hear.
Now, we're not discriminating against the building industry, but farming's had to get its act together.
Definitely.
Clean waters and Fonterra's been strict. So there are challenges in the building industry, and they are moving towards sustainability, aren't they?
They are. I think most people in the industry will admit that it's been largely a broken industry for some time in many ways. And you're right, it needs to get its act together and start working not only for better outcomes for the environment, but also better incomes for the customers that are buying the end products.
Daniel, can you itemise the waste that builders or the construction industry is taking to the landfill? What kind of things are being dumped?
Predominantly two main materials. It's timber, which is often treated timber, and concrete. But there's both construction of new materials, so waste from new builds, but also the demolition of old buildings. So you've got both areas contributing to a landfill.
Now recently, Jane Dove Junior, or Juno, I don't know if you know how to say her last name, she raised the issue because she was concerned about what appears to be the proliferation of shrink plastic or scaffolding plastic. It's very popular for commercial builds, isn't it?
It is. You see it all around town. You see it in most cities around New Zealand when there's new builds or renovations happening. I think it's really being used as a way for builders to be able to work through all weathers and a high degree of security and even safety. So that doesn't make it all good, but I think that's why it's being used, just to give all weather access, and so less delays due to weather.
It really is an amazing product, and if there's no contamination, it's 100% recyclable. But as you know, if you've got a grinder there with concrete and it gets scratched and contamination, the cost of cleaning it,
that's right,
it's not really worthwhile, is it?
No, that's right. The other cost is obviously the cost of scaffolding that it has to sit behind. So that's a major cost on a building site to put that up.
Can you shed some light on this? It just seems extraordinary. Worldwide, the construction and operation of buildings accounted for 39% of emissions in 2017.
Well, it's not just the materials themselves, it's also the ongoing running costs in terms of energy costs, maintenance costs, etc. So unfortunately in New Zealand we have a history of building less than outstanding performers in terms of buildings, and so that's all contributing to the ongoing running costs, and that's actually one of the largest carbon or environmental impacts that buildings are having.
So it could be anything like a drafty home, or
exactly right, inefficient heating.
Your plumbing's not environmentally friendly, and a whole raft of stuff.
All of that. So there's actually, when you're being qualified in these areas, there's a whole raft of 12 different areas that you look into and measure on a building.
It does seem ironic that the home is the most important thing to us, particularly in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And yet in some ways our home can be one of the biggest polluters of the planet.
Not only
it's a bit of a shock, isn't it?
It is a shock, and it's not only of the planet, it's also of the people that are living in those homes, which is the truly shocking bit. So a large majority of New Zealand built homes are using toxic materials in their construction, and so that's creating unhealthy living environments for the people that are living in them and the families that are living in them.
The fact that we're a little reluctant to embrace more environmental homes because of the cost, or is it just an attitude thing that for decades the building industry has been inclined to taking, economies of scale, mass-produced stuff at a good price, and before you know it, you're forced to be doing GEB, you're all getting the same timber and trusses and so forth?
There's an element of that, and it comes down to really the building industry being primarily driven by two things. One being the material industries and suppliers, and the other being the builders. It's really not focused on the end user, the the consumer or the people that are building and living in the homes. So that's definitely part of the problem.
I have read that when it comes to building materials, New Zealand's frightfully expensive, even compared to Australia. So the thought of doing the right thing by the planet when it comes to building, people think, oh, you know, it's like someone on a budget. They want to buy free-range eggs, but no one's looking. They'll get the cheap ones.
Yeah, and I think there's the unmentioned elephant in the room is that New Zealand's addicted to a couple of things. One is the idea of square metre build rates, which aren't particularly useful, and partly from that and partly from other reasons, as a result, large square metre sizings for new homes. So we've got, I think at the moment, an average of 220 square metre home for
That's a big home.
It's a big home for 2.4 occupants. Whereas in the 1950s, you had average of 105 square metres for 4 occupants. So there's been a big change there over a relatively short period of time.
The paradigm shift needs to be, hey, why do we need such massive floor areas?
I think that's part of it.
And not be fixated by the cost per square metre.
100%. So for me, the real question is, particularly for the customer, what's the end price of the build rather than what is the square metre rate, and what's it going to cost me over its lifetime? And those are far more important questions to answer.
Because the stereotype with a home these days is the concrete slab.
Yeah.
Then things are prefabricated like trusses and they arrive covered with plastic.
Yeah.
And that can't be recycled. And then it's the jib and the insulation. It's all in bulk, isn't it?
It is in bulk, and it's also, like you said earlier, specific suppliers. So whether it be jib or careful not to mention too many brand names, whether it's a specific brand name of a specific product, that may not be the best product in all instances.
This is the segue to what you do. You're with Greenbridge Homes and Landscapes. And I want to make it very clear, this is not an advertorial, we're having a conversation. What do you guys do? And what's the good news?
Well, the good news is there are quite a lot of solutions out there, and we're not by any means the only people looking to do things better in the industry. Greenbridge does two main things, so environmental and edible landscapes, and healthy small footprint homes. And we also have a wastewater engineer in our team, and we do large projects where we pull all those services together and do community projects.
Daniel, I'm sure there's a lot of people would love to go the Greenbridge Homes and Landscapes way, but they may have an existing home and, you know, money's tight, or they're about to do the build and, you know, they've just got the loan. What are some of the little incremental steps people can make in terms of doing the right thing by the environment, or even the conversation to have with their builder?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the landscape, one of the best things they can do is learn to grow some of their own food. So there's nothing more empowering and better for people's health than growing locally grown fresh food. For the house itself, it's a little bit more complicated. It depends a lot on what's there existing. Insulation is definitely one of the things you can look at, and also ventilation. So insulating and ventilating homes, and it's going to be a little bit different depending on each case, depending on what you're looking at for each house.
Like if you took out the insulation, a lot of it is technically nasty by way of the environment, and you replaced it with a wool-based thing. Big difference in cost though, isn't there?
There is. So when we're doing a new build, we still, as standard, specify wool insulation. We specify as standard Terralana products, and it is a higher cost again per square metre.
Yeah.
But the overall performance and what it's achieving isn't easily achieved by the other products. And an overall build cost, it's actually only hundreds of dollars and maybe in low thousands. And in the overall cost of a build, that's really nothing.
So you might be able to insulate, you know, the roof I'm talking about, a modest small home for $5 to $7 grand. What would the wool-based insulation be? Would it be 15 grand?
It's not usually that high. So on a small house, the cost is in the low thousands. Yeah. So it's so hard to say because each house is different construction. But yeah, it's not a big cost differential. And so for me, it's more about making good decisions that are going to work long term than it is about the...
And long term, you just think the house would breathe better, and that's going to be a better, healthier, environmentally friendly outcome. That's
right. And for a renovate, it's a little bit more complicated because you still need to make sure that your walls can get any moisture out of them. So ideally, you are not only insulating the walls, but if there isn't a cavity system in place where the cladding's outside of that insulation, then adding that to the system so that you still have a breathable system so you can get any moisture out. So because there's unknown hazards in putting insulation into a standard, so say, state home, which is you can trap moisture in the wall system if it's not done properly. On the home side of things, we've been designing small footprint healthy homes for about a decade, but like everyone else, there's a lot of challenges that you have in custom design. And so one of the first things is, if you want a green home, the realistic design cost from start to finish for a custom design is sort of that 40 to 50 grand at the start end, and you can spend considerably more than that just on the design phase. And for most New Zealanders, they're simply not going to add that to the front of the build cost before they've even started. And so one of the easiest things we could do is integrate into pre-designed plans all those green advantages in healthy homes in a cost of a plan that we can sell over again, and therefore not have to charge so much. So we might be selling a plan for $5,000 to $10,000, which if we were doing the equivalent as a custom design, that would be 50 or more.
Daniel, I want to make it clear and reiterate, we're not beating up on the building industry, and they're under a lot of pressure at the moment with supply issues and COVID and inflation. Many have underquoted, and as you'd be aware, mental illness and suicides in the building industry is the highest of any sector.
That's right.
So what can a small builder do that wants to do the right thing by the environment? Some little steps.
Looking after their mental health first is about partnering with their customer, and so taking a different approach where they're not taking all the risks, so it's shared risk with the customer, so that if prices do change, that their contract allows them to change the price that the customer's paying to reflect the cost that they're wearing, and just being open and honest and transparent with the customer, and then being able to look at the options in terms of the green possibilities, whether it be insulation, whether it be different interior linings, etc. Another thing is, you say that the availability of materials is far more difficult in the current market than it has traditionally been, so whereby we may have been quite dogged in the past specifying a specific product, now we're talking about the outcome. And so being more flexible about what products you use in order to get the right outcome rather than being stuck to a particular brand or product. I think just having that flexibility both with the way you work and with the customer is really going to help.
What you are suggesting indicates be patient. It's a relationship, it's a long-term thing. It's not the rush, like, my goodness, the clock starts now, you know what I mean, the countdown.
Yeah.
And for every day where you're not doing the build, people get stressed.
Yeah.
And you can see why people want to use shrink plastic, can't you? If you've got that mindset where it's
Yeah.
a competition racing the clock, just about anyone would have the scaffolding plastic around, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, it's also about construction methodology. So you've mentioned the word prefabrication. So there is the possibility of doing faster builds with less time out in the weather using prefabricated wall systems, etc. All our plans are designed to allow for that. And so that creates quicker build times, and particularly in areas with unruly or unknown weather patterns, that can be a real benefit to get a house up quickly, and it has the possibility of reducing the cost of the house for the customer.
Daniel, just showcase some of the builds and projects you've been involved with that you're proud of. You think, hey, this is doing the right thing by the environment, the family, and of course social outcomes.
We've been involved with projects all over New Zealand, from Benoli Gardens in Auckland, which we're proud of having helped with the landscape from such a big project doing amazing things in terms of increasing performance outcomes, down to local homes here. We've got a home in Tamandra Street, custom design home, 4-bedroom mezzanine home. A great example of what can be achieved in custom design for a client. That's gone on to been developed as one of our plans for our pre-designed range. And also what was the Mandian is now the Mia House, which probably started us down the path of designing this range of plans. That's been a great example, and a lot of people are really excited to see what can be achieved in a small home to create a beautiful living environment that's healthy and lower running costs, and just a beautiful space to be in.